Okay, I'm recording this for our attendance. And now I will take a photo. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. Last photo. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's start, no? So the slide rule is a tool designed by Doctors John and Evelyn Billings in order for us to teach the Billings ovulation method well. So if you are already accredited BOM teachers, no, and if you're attending sessions on the Billings ovulation method, please, and if you have already the slide rule, please use the slide rule in teaching the Billings ovulation method. So our session for today, third Saturday, we will begin on how to use the slide rule to teach the Billings ovulation method. Okay, so let's start. So the cycle begins with menstruation. So if you will look at the PowerPoint presentation, you will have there the diagram wherein the endometrium lining is being shed or being dislodged. So the cycle begins with a menstruation. And during the days of menstruation, the plug leaves the cervix. So take note of the mucus plug or the G mucus that closes the cervix. So during the menstrual bleeding, plug leaves the cervix. Cervix is open. That is why Doctors John and Evelyn Billings would like to inform us that during menstruation, it is known to be a possible fertile period. Okay? So endometrium is shed during the days of menstruation. The ovaries would be resting, but there are occasions in the life of the woman wherein the ovaries are very active during the days of menstruation. Vulva, the sensation now will be wet. If the sensation is wet, then we considered it as fertile period. No? That is why we have EDR1. For those couples who would like to postpone pregnancy, EDR1 says avoid intercourse during the days of bleeding. Heavy bleeding obscure the presence of what mucus because ovulation might take early in the cycle and it might happen during the days of menstruation. Look at the box below the PowerPoint presentation. Heavy bleeding obscures mucus when ovulation is early. So cycle begins with a menstruation. Okay, let's continue. After menstruation, all of you are already familiar to the next phase of the cycle. And we call it the BIP or the basic infertile pattern. If you will look at the slide rule that I am holding, there are two types of BIP, but we are still dealing with the first type of BIP, and we call it the BIP of unchanging pattern of dry. In short, BIP of dry. During the days of BIP, look at the cervix. I want you to focus on the cervix. The cervix is completely closed by the mucus plug. Sperm cannot enter. Look at the sperm. They cannot enter because the mucus plug is impenetrable. So this is BIP, which comes after menstruation. Okay, let's look at the one inside the box. Sperm cannot enter during the days of BIP. Sperm dies immediately. And during the days of the BIP, the ovaries is known to be resting. And we call this type of BIP as the unchanging pattern of dry. There is another type of BIP which is not yet discussed. We call it the unchanging pattern of discharge. Okay, so this is the two types of BIP. The BIP of the unchanging pattern of dry and the BIP unchanging pattern of discharge. So take note, during the days of the BIP, The cervix is completely closed, impenetrable. Sperm cannot enter. Clear? So now, after the BIP, okay, after the BIP, there is what we call the changing pattern of fertility, meaning the start of the production of the mucus. According to Doctors John and Evelyn Billings, mucus must change, from a sticky sensation ending with a slippery sensation. So we call this the changing pattern of fertility. This is the third phase of the cycle. Look at the diagram in the PowerPoint presentation. During the days of the changing pattern of fertility, the cervix is open. Estrogen begins to rise because follicles are all awake. If cervix is open and there are production of different types of mucus, you know the different types, the S mucus, the P mucus, the L mucus, sperm now can enter. Sperm will be nourished and there will be a possible what? Fertilization if intercourse will take place during the days of the changing pattern of fertility. The third phase of the cycle. Ovaries are active during these days wherein the cervix is producing a lot of mucus. Plug leaves the cervix during the days of the changing pattern of fertility, making sperm entry possible. And the most important, during the days of the changing pattern of fertility, vulva is no longer dry. Vulva, the sensation would be what? Sticky. It would become wet and it will end up with a slippery sensation at the vulva. This is what we call the changing pattern of fertility, wherein the sensation of the mucus is changing from a sticky sensation ending with a slippery sensation. What is the importance of the slippery sensation? Take note, slippery sensation indicates that the egg is already mature and any moment there will be what? There will be ovulation. That is the importance of the changing pattern of fertility. Mucus must end with a slippery sensation in order for us to know that the egg is already mature and any moment there will be an ovulation. Clear? Okay, now what happens next after ovulation? After the changing pattern of fertility, we have the last phase of the cycle and we call it the luteal phase. Before, we call it the post-ovulatory. The luteal phase will only be considered infertile when you already reach the 4th day of the luteal. Why? Look at the diagram in our PowerPoint presentation. Look, okay, look at the diagram. It says there, okay, look, the cervix is completely closed at the 4th day past the peak day. So during the days of what? 1, 2, 3. After the peak day, the last day of slippery sensation, the first 3 days of the luteal, the cervix is still open. It begins to close on the 4th day. So infertility starts on the 4th day past the peak, or the 4th day of the luteal phase. So I hope this is clear to all of you. So now take note that the vulva is dry or sticky, no longer wet or no longer slippery during the days of the luteal phase. Okay? So when we teach the Billings ovulation method to couples during what we call this, during initial instruction, yung unang-una nating pagtuturo ng Billings method, take note of the following. Only the following symbols are taught during the initial instruction. The red color that symbolizes bleeding or shaded circle. You may use spotting, no? You may use the 3 dots, no, for spotting. And then if the sensation is dry and you don't see anything, nothing is seen, nothing is felt, dry, the color is green, or you may use a straight vertical line, signifies dry, infertile. If there is already mucus secretion, then you may use the symbol circle. We don't have the baby stump, but if you will be using the Billings up, there is the baby stump there, no? But in the absence of the baby stump, we use circle to indicate the first appearance of mucus, possible fertile. Then, if there is a peak day, I know and I assume that all of you are already familiar with the term peak day. Peak day is the last day of the slippery sensation. Take note, peak day is not the last day of mucus, no? It is the last day of the slippery sensation. So take note of that. That is peak day. If mucus will end with a slippery sensation, we can only mark it with an X if the next day you are already dry. It means you have a slippery sensation last day. The last day of the slippery sensation, we call it the peak day. Mark it with an X. We can only identify that is the last day if the next day, no, the sensation is no longer slippery. You are dry, no? So mark it with an X. And then if there will be an intercourse during the days, no, of the chart, then place the symbol capital letter I or the uppercase I. If you are using the Microsoft, in order to have a capital letter I, be sure the font is Times Roman. So these are the different colors and symbols that you can use in the charting. And take note, we are not teaching what? The equal sign or the yellow color. So take note, we are not using the color yellow. During the initial instruction, we don't teach the yellow color or the equal sign. Only the following symbols are taught during the initial instruction. Now, how to use the slide rule in teaching the Billings ovulation method, no? So you will be receiving your slide rule, especially for those who ordered the slide rule. So these are the different phases of the cycle based on the slide rule. You have the menstruation, which is the beginning of the cycle, followed by the basic infertile pattern. There are 2 types of BIP. The unchanging pattern of dry, the color green, and the other one is the unchanging pattern of discharge. But take note, during the initial instruction, we don't teach the BIP of unchanging pattern of discharge, no? And after the BIP, you have now the changing pattern of fertility, ending with a peak day. Take note, ending with a peak day. And then you have now what we call the luteal phase. Okay? So the luteal phase is what? Is 11 to 16 days when you consider the total range. So 11 to 16 days. These are the 4 phases of the cycle wherein you can use the slide rule during pre-Cana, and you will be able to explain to your participants the 4 phases of the cycle using the slide rule. I repeat, menstruation, open cervix. BIP, closed cervix. Changing pattern of fertility ending with a peak. Open cervix, including the first 3 days of the luteal. Open cervix. And then luteal phase. The luteal phase begins day 1 after the peak day. No, day 1 after the peak day. But even though it begins with day 1 after the peak day, the first 3 days of the luteal are considered to be fertile. Why? Because the cervix is still open. Cervix begins to close 4th day past the peak or on the 4th day of the luteal phase. Let us continue. So menstruation, the infertility, BIP. Fertility starts from the first appearance of mucus, developing into a slippery sensation peak day, including the first 3 days of the luteal. Infertility begins on the 4th day past the peak day or the 4th day of the luteal phase. So again, we can teach the slide rule during, we can use the slide rule, my apologies, no? During pre-Cana, and our participants in the pre-Cana will be able to identify those days that are considered to be fertile and those days that are considered to be infertile. Okay, so the slide rule is a very important tool in teaching the Billings ovulation method. Now, menstruation begins with a heavy flow. The first day of flowing bleed is the beginning of a new cycle. So menstruation, look at the diagram on top. You can see that the lining of the endometrium is being shed. This is menstruation. Endometrium is shed. And then look, the ovaries is resting. But for some, the ovaries might be active, making menstruation to be what? To be considered fertile, no? Because there is what we call an early ovulation. Take note that during the days of menstruation, the sensation at the vulva is considered to be wet. So wet bleed. Now, after menstruation is a period of infertility. Take note of that. Huh? Immediately after menstruation, the cervix is completely closed by the mucus plug. Menstruation, after that, that will be infertile. And you know that, that is the BIP. The length of the cycle is determined by the BIP. Take note, huh? The reason behind the woman is what? Having a short cycle, a long cycle, an average cycle. It is not because of the changing pattern of fertility. It is not because of the luteal phase. It is not because of the menstruation. The reason behind the cycle is average, short, and long. It is because of the basic infertile pattern. Let me read. The length of the cycle is determined by the basic infertile pattern. During these days, the cervix is closed with a thick plug of mucus known as the G mucus. Okay? So this is the BIP. Look at the one on top, the diagram. You will notice that the cervix is completely closed by the plug, BIP. There are two types. BIP of dry, unchanging pattern of dry. The color green, nothing is seen, nothing is felt. And the other types of BIP is the unchanging pattern of discharge, which is not yet discussed in our session. No? So we are only focused on the color green. The pattern of dryness or discharge may continue for a few days in a cycle of average length. No? So meaning the number of dry days after menstruation or the number of days of BIP will continue. I think if you have 7 or until 9 days of BIP, we consider it as an average cycle, meaning your menstruation will commence before the 35-day cycle, no? Within the 35-day cycle. Okay? The BIP can be what? Can be long. Look what happens, no? If you have the slide rule, you can demonstrate now in your pre-K na that the BIP can be long. So if the BIP would be extended, no? The length of the cycle is determined by the BIP. The pattern of dryness or discharge may continue for a few days in a cycle of average length, or even weeks when ovulation is delayed. So meaning ovulation will take place a little bit farther. Why? It will be delayed. Why? Because the appearance of mucus is not yet available. How come the mucus is not yet available? Because the BIP extended. It goes beyond, no? Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. So the extension of the BIP, no, it will make now the cycle a long cycle. There is also a possibility for a short cycle. Look at the short cycle. There is a possibility wherein the BIP will disappear. No BIP. Or if there will be BIP, maybe 3 days only, very short. It might have a shorter BIP, or the BIP might disappear. And with that, we consider this as a short cycle, meaning your menstruation will commence maybe on the 18th day of the month or the 20th, no? Before reaching the 35-day cycle. So you have a short cycle if there will be a short days of BIP, or if the BIP will disappear. If you already received your slide rule during pre-K na, you can show this, that the BIP can be shorter or the BIP can disappear, wherein the menstruation and the mucus are together. So very difficult to see the presence of the mucus because the mens obscure the presence of the mucus because of its red color. This is the reason behind we have 3 types of cycle: a short cycle, an average cycle, and a long cycle. What makes the cycle short, average, or long? It depends on the BIP. Is that clear? Okay, so let's continue. Excuse me. Okay, so again, let's go back to the slide rule. So we are done with the BIP. We are discussing BIP earlier. So we go now to the fertile period. When we speak of the fertile period, we are talking about the changing pattern of mucus or the changing pattern of fertility. Mucus starts with a sticky sensation with a cloudy appearance. Take note, ha? Sticky sensation with a cloudy appearance. Then it will develop into a clear mucus with a wet sensation. And then finally, it will end with a slippery sensation. Let me read the one inside the box. The changing pattern leading to slippery. Peak is the last day of slippery sensation. In Filipino, ito ang huling araw na ang mucus ay madulas. Ovulation might happen during the peak day, which I already mentioned to you. But it can also happen in day 1 or day 2 after the peak. Ovum or the egg is alive 11 to 24 hours. Cervix is open during the first appearance of mucus until it becomes slippery, including the first 3 days of the luteal. So cervix is open. So the one inside the blue box, these are the days wherein the cervix is open. And we consider these days as fertile days. Clear? Now, during the days of mucus secretion, the vulva no longer wet or slippery. Okay, after the peak day. That is the meaning of that, no? After the peak day, the vulva is no longer wet or slippery. Endometrium prepares for pregnancy, no? Okay, during the days of the fertile period, the endometrium is what? Is thickening. We will have a special lesson for that. And during the luteal phase, the endometrium lining will be what? Would be preparing, no, for the what we call this, for the baby itself, no, because implantation might happen during the days of intercourse, during the days of mucus secretion, no. Yeah, and if there will be an ovulation, there will be an implantation. So the endometrium is being prepared, no? So if fertilization would take place, no, during the days of what we call mucus secretion. So if there will be an ovulation and if there will be a fertilization, then of course the endometrium is already prepared, no? And the endometrium is what? It will serve as what? The temporary house of the baby. There will be an implantation. Okay, so ovulation and the peak. So take note that during the peak day, there is what we call an ovulation. The peak day is the last day of slippery sensation. It is also the day of ovulation. Okay, but there are scenarios wherein ovulation might take place during day 1 or day 2 after the peak day. So again, take note, listen to this one. So as we have learned in Saturday 1, in Saturday 2, that the peak day is the day of ovulation. But now I am revealing another concept. And what is that? That ovulation might take place, no? Also during the days of what? During day 1 or day 2 after the peak day. But most of the time, it will always happen during the peak day. Okay? The egg is still alive during the 3rd day. Okay, yeah? If ovulation will take place on day 2, so the life of the egg is 24 hours. So if there will be an ovulation in day 2, so absolutely, the egg is still alive in day 3 and the cervix is still open. So we need to wait for the egg to die and we need to wait for the cervix to be completely closed. And the cervix is completely closed on the 4th day after the peak day or the 4th day past the peak day. So by the end of the 3rd day after the peak, the cervix is completely closed by the mucus plug. Until that time, there are still channels of mucus for sperm transport and survival. So take note of that. If intercourse will happen on the 3rd day past the peak, there would be a possibility for pregnancy. Why? Look at what is written there. That is the study conducted by Dr. John and Evelyn Billings, that the sperm can still enter and survive and be able to meet the egg. So we need to wait for the cervix to be completely closed. Okay? So now the luteal phase starts at day 1 after the peak day. Okay, no? But infertility starts on the 4th day because some people, they are confused. They thought that the luteal phase starts on the 4th day because on the 4th day, it is already infertile. Cervix is completely closed. No. Luteal phase begins on day 1 after the peak day. But because the cervix is still open, we allow 3 days because that is the time allotted for the cervix to be completely closed by the G-plug mucus, no? So on the 4th day, that is the 4th day of the what? Of the luteal. And that is the beginning of the infertility. So on the 4th day, look at our PowerPoint, infertile phase after ovulation. That is the beginning. And on the 4th day, the egg is absolutely dead. Ovulation cannot occur again. So there is no possibility for another ovulation after the, what we call this, after the peak day and 1, 2, 3, no? Menstruation will take place 11 to 16 days after the peak day. And during the days of infertility, the 4th day past the peak day, until the next menstruation, the cervix is completely closed. So take note, if you will be asked, when do you think menstruation will commence? Menstruation can only commence 11 to 16 days after the peak day. If the woman will not experience a peak day, automatic, there will be no luteal phase because the luteal phase can only exist if mucus develops from a sticky sensation ending with a slippery sensation. There is a peak. If there will be no peak, then no luteal, then there will be also no menstrual bleeding. So these are the different phases of the cycle using the slide rule. Okay? So if you will compare now the slide rule to the actual chart, you can now make a comparison. So if you are using the slide rule, menstruation, where is menstruation in the chart? Let me give the days. Day 1 to day 5, menstrual bleeding. For those couples who are postponing pregnancy, we apply EDR1. Avoid intercourse during the days of what? Of bleeding, menstruation, EDR1. So look what will happen after menstruation. BIP of unchanging pattern of dry. Compare the slide rule on top and the actual chart. BIP starts on day 6 and BIP ends on day 10. For those couples who would like to postpone pregnancy, what is the rule for BIP? EDR2. Alternate evenings are available for intercourse during the days of BIP. So meaning, if day 6 is dry, it means you are dry upon rising from the bed until you reach what we call evening, until you reach 6 p.m. No? That's the beginning of what we call evening. You are totally dry, no? And if you are dry, you can have intercourse on day 6. After intercourse on day 6, what comes next? Day 8. After day 8, intercourse is resumed on day 10. That is the meaning of alternate evenings. Why? Because if there will be an intercourse on day 6 at night, the following day, day 7, the woman will become wet due to seminal fluid. So if you are wet, abstain on day 7. And if day 9, you are dry again from morning until evening. So intercourse is resumed at night, no? Day 8. And then after day 8, you have now day 10. That is the meaning of the alternate evenings. Now, look at the slide rule. The beginning of the fertile phase. Fertile period begins on day 11. The first appearance of mucus. What rule to apply? EDR3. What is EDR3? Listen, avoid intercourse during the days of discharge until it develops into a slippery sensation with a peak, including the first 3 days of dry of the luteal phase. That is what we called fertile period. We apply what rule? I repeat, EDR3. Avoid intercourse during the days of mucus, ending with the peak day, including the first 3 days of the luteal. Clear? Excuse me. Now, the last one is the luteal phase. The luteal phase begins on day 17. But day 17, day 18, day 19, the first 3 days of the luteal are considered to be what? Fertile. Infertility begins when? 20. On the 4th day past the peak, or on the 4th day of the luteal phase, the couple now can apply the peak rule. And what is the peak rule? Intercourse is available every day at any time. So intercourse can be in the morning, evening, afternoon, early morning of day 20. Intercourse can happen also on day 21 anytime, on day 22 anytime, on day 23 anytime, on day 24 anytime, 25, 26, 27, 28 until 31, no? So during those days, no, beginning from the 4th day until the end of the luteal phase, intercourse is available every day at any time. And you can explain the following rules using the slide rule. No? So this is the slide rule, and the one below is the actual chart. So what I discussed is this one, how to use the slide rule. No? So take note, you have the menstruation, open cervix. EDR1, avoid intercourse during the days of bleeding. Immediately after menstruation, the cervix would be completely closed by the mucus plug or G mucus. And we call these days as the basic infertile pattern. There are 2 types of BIP. The one in green, we call it the unchanging pattern of dry, meaning you don't see any discharge and the sensation of the vulva is dry. The other one, which is not yet discussed, is the BIP of unchanging pattern of discharge. It has a discharge, but the cervix is completely closed. No? So during the days of BIP, if the couple would like to postpone pregnancy, we apply the EDR2. Alternate evenings are available during the days of the BIP. Then we have the EDR3, no? The beginning of the appearance of mucus, leading to a peak. We call it the changing pattern of fertility. What is the meaning of the changing pattern of fertility? Mucus starts with a sticky sensation with a cloudy appearance. Then it develops into a wet sensation with a clear appearance, like water, it's watery. Then it develops into a slippery sensation. If mucus will end with a slippery sensation, there is a peak. What is the definition of peak? The last day of slippery sensation. We can only identify that the mucus is what? Is the last day of slippery sensation if the following day or the next day, the sensation is already dry. If the next day is already dry, mark it with an X. Go back. Mark with an X. That is the last day of slippery sensation. We call it the changing pattern of fertility leading to peak. But the fertile period begins on the first appearance of mucus until it becomes peak including the first 3 days of dry. What rule do we need to apply? We apply the EDR3. Avoid intercourse during the days of discharge, leading to peak, including the first 3 days of the luteal. This is the entire EDR3. We avoid genital contact if the couple would be what? Postponing pregnancy. On the 4th day past the peak, we apply the peak rule. And what is the peak rule? Intercourse is available every day at any time. Take note that the luteal phase begins on the first day after the peak, but infertility begins on the 4th day past the peak day. So this is what we call the slide rule, and how the slide rule can be used in teaching the Billings ovulation method, especially during your pre-Cana. Is this clear? Do you have any questions would you like to ask before we have the short break? Okay, let me unmute you, no? So let me unmute you. Okay, you can now switch on your microphone if you have any questions regarding on how to use the slide rule in teaching the 4 phases of the cycle and the different rules, no? So take note, I am only using the slide rule to teach the normal pattern, no? Again, what is a normal pattern? A normal pattern means the moment mucus starts to appear, mucus develops into what? From a sticky sensation ending with a slippery sensation with a peak. That is a normal pattern, no? So there is another pattern, we call it the irregular pattern, which we discussed last time, and we will have again a lesson on that today. Irregular pattern means when mucus starts to appear, mucus will not develop into a slippery sensation, no? Kaya you notice there is no X here. So no slippery, no peak, no ovulation. If there will be no ovulation, there will be no luteal phase. If there will be no luteal phase, no menstrual bleeding to commence. So that is why we call it irregular pattern. Again, irregular pattern means when mucus starts to appear, mucus will not develop into a slippery sensation. No peak, no ovulation, no luteal phase, no menstruation to commence. Irregular pattern. Clear? Any questions from the class before we have a short break? Yes, question.
Doc, ano po, possible ba ng isang tao, isang babae, may cycle siya na biglang long, tapos biglang magiging short, tapos
mag-average? Aileen, no? Correct po ba? Okay. Pwede po yun, no? During the entire reproductive age, no? Maybe at the start of puberty until you reach your menopausal, you will be experiencing what we call a short, an average, and a long cycle. That is why we cannot solely apply yung method developed by Dr. Ogaino, and that is the rhythm method. Because the rhythm method, there is counting, parang 7 days before, 7 days after. Because we always assume that the cycle of the woman is always an average cycle. But the moment the cycle changes, due to what? Due to the environmental factors, due to the food that we are eating, due to the stress that we encountering every day, the cycle might be short, might be average, might be long. So the rhythm method can no longer be applicable if there will be changes in the cycle. So we use the Billings ovulation method because in the Billings ovulation method, we don't count, but we observe daily. What is my sensation today? Am I dry? Am I wet? There is no counting. And with that, we can now apply what we call a sound decision, whether we will have an intercourse or not, depending on our goal. The goal for the year is to abstain. The goal for the year is to postpone pregnancy due to what? Due to personal reason. And because you are postponing pregnancy, and then you can now what? Take note of the sensation. If you are wet, abstain. If you are dry, then go. Take note, what kind of dry? Is it BIP or is it luteal? If it is BIP, alternate evenings. If it is luteal, then every day at any time. So we need to know what kind of dry we are experiencing. Anyway, we will have a lesson on that later. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Doc. Thank you.
Another question? Meron pa po ba? So if not, then we will stop the recording.